The US Treasury says that Russia's oil revenues have suffered a significant decline since the G7 introduced a price cap on Russian crude oil. The G7, along with the European Union and Australia, introduced a price cap of $60 a barrel last year. Now, as a result, the US Treasury Department says that Russian oil revenues have fallen 40% year on year. Oil revenues used to make up about a third of the entire Russian budget. They now make up about a quarter of the budget. I want to bring in now Anastasia Fedik. She's an assistant professor of finance at the Haas School of Business at the University of California at Berkeley. She's also a founding member of the NGO Economists for Ukraine. It's good to see you again. Good to have you back on the program. I know we've talked before about these price caps, and there was a lot of skepticism about this untested oil price cap scheme last year. I mean, has it worked as well as the Biden administration claims it has?
Yes, I would definitely say it's bringing results. I mean, let's look at the data, right? The price cap on oil was instituted in December. The price cap on oil products followed in February. And if we take a look at Russia's revenues from energy, those have fallen by 47% from the last quarter of 2022 to the first quarter of 2023. So on that front, the price cap is definitely achieving the goal. Of course, the goal of the price cap was twofold. It was to reduce Russia's revenues while also to keep the oil markets stable. And we're seeing both of those goals being met. So the oil prices on the global markets are going down, and the discount on Russian oil in particular is also increasing. So Russia's revenues are falling from three ways because of reduced volumes of oil sold, because of reduced global oil prices, and also because of a steeper discount on Russian oil.
I mean, it all sounds good. Is the price cap, though, is it being enforced as rigorously as it could be?
There is definitely room for improvement, especially on the enforcement front. So if we take a look at more granular data, which some of my colleagues have done, I'm kind of looking port by port, what we see is some of the ports, especially ports in Russia's far east, like in the Vladivostok region, those ports are still shipping out oil above the price cap. And of course, those are further away, so it's harder to monitor for governments like in Europe. But we still see Western firms, including European firms, ensuring as well as providing shipping services for those shipments. So there's definitely scope for more enforcement of European companies and other G7 companies to verify that what they are shipping and ensuring is well below the price cap.
Russia, we know, has rerouted shipments of oil, natural gas, and coal to places such as Brazil and India. We know that there are attempts to de-dollarize oil sales on the global market. I mean, is this an issue that the G7 group can address?
So the rerouting itself is not an issue. It's actually a feature rather than a bug of the price caps, right? As I mentioned, the objective here is dual. We want to reduce Russia's revenues from energy, but we also don't want to destabilize the energy market. So the price cap is meant to keep the oil flowing, but at a lower rate, so reducing the revenue that Russia gets from it. And so it's kind of by design that is going to flow to other places as long as it's going at rates below the price cap. And also, a lot of the infrastructure in Russia historically has been geared towards the West, especially Europe. So having to now ship things as far as Brazil is definitely more difficult and more costly for them. So that also organically reduces the revenues that Russia ends up getting from its oil.
And what about this de-dollarization trend? I mean, I guess we can call it a trend, but there is this movement to de-dollarize oil sales. Does that help Russia?
Honestly, I don't think it will. If anything, actually, with some of the movement that we're seeing, right, with oil flowing to those other countries within the BRICS especially, and also trying to kind of to move away from the dollar, if anything, the beneficiaries here are going to be those third countries, right? So India, China, which are getting Russian oil at cheaper prices and that are also gaining bargaining power vis-a-vis Russia and possibly with these other partners as well. So I don't think it's going to benefit Russia, although we may want to consider how much of a benefit those other countries are getting.
Yeah, that's a good point. The European Union, it still imports some natural gas from Russia, but nowhere near the 40% that it used to import. The G7 now wants to consider permanently shutting down Russian gas pipelines to Europe. How likely is that?
Yeah, so I think here it depends on what kind of horizon we're looking at. In the very short term, to be honest, I would say pretty unlikely. Of course, we're still seeing disagreement within the EU because different countries have different exposure to Russian energy historically and have done kind of differently well in terms of how well they've weaned off so far. So I think in the very immediate terms, those kinds of proposals are going to get a lot of pushback. But if you look at the longer term, I wouldn't rule it out, right? The kind of pushback that this is getting now is still coming from the same place as the kind of pushback we've gotten for the existing measures. And if we look at those measures, the embargo in the EU, the partial embargo, and the price cap, they've done pretty well. And some of those catastrophic predictions that some of the policymakers were kind of afraid of, they didn't come to pass. Instead, the predictions that academic economists have made, especially, for example, in Germany, about how minor of an effect this weaning off of Russian energy will actually have, those seem to be holding true. So I think in the longer term, we're moving that way. But of course, there's going to be resistance.
Yeah. As always, Anastasia Fennick of the Haas School of Finance in Berkeley, good to talk with you. We appreciate your analysis. Thank you.